we saw a small boat gently gliding over the calm waters of the sea, heading towards the serene and peaceful island of Torishirima. The boat is about to dock at the pier, but on board there is a boy who is contemplating the clear sky, carefully watching the seagulls that fly around. As he watches them in silence, he mutters to himself that it makes him feel like a wounded migratory bird. This extremely specific reflection seems to respond to an inner melancholy, as if it were translating the silent pain of a broken heart. "Oh, my friend, what a drama," he whispers with a certain exaggeration, as if his entire existence had been ruined by a small setback, like, for example, the misfortune of breaking a nail. He then realizes how peculiar it is to engage in such a deep conversation with an unknown elderly lady, which makes him prefer to turn his attention to the landscape that unfolds in front of him. At that moment, a butterfly with a luminous, almost ethereal appearance floats before your eyes and disappears, carried by the wind. As he turns his gaze towards the port, his eyes come across the figure of a stunning woman, whose presence impacts him in such a way that his face distorts with amazement as if her eyes had become square. Finally, the boat docks. Harry observes the island with remarkable attention. There is something familiar about that place. Although he has never been there before, a sudden and deep feeling of nostalgia invades him. It is at that exact moment that the mysterious lady reappears, as if following him, and asks him an intriguing question. What was that last thing the nose said? Already showing some exhaustion with the interaction, the boy protests that she seems to be reading his thoughts. With an almost provocative serenity, she responds, "If it bothers you, then you should avoid thinking out loud." Curious, Harry wonders if she has ever missed a place she has never been to. The lady looks at him tenderly and answers yes, that this feeling has a name and is more common than he imagines. He then hesitates and confesses that perhaps he expressed himself poorly, as he actually wanted to refer to Yabu. As if the conversation hadn't happened, she says goodbye coldly, says she doesn't like him and walks away. Later, the boy is led by Misaki, who presents herself as responsible for him during his stay. She accompanies him to the place where he will be staying, an old warehouse renovated to serve as a room. With slight embarrassment, she apologizes for the musty smell and the mess. Kai, with his usual poetic touch, responds that he doesn't care, as that environment faithfully reflects his emotional state. He is, after all, an injured migratory bird. Misaki observes him strangely, as if saying with her gaze, "What's wrong with this strange figure?" She mentions that another relative resides there, but is currently absent, promising to introduce him soon. Harry throws herself on the floor of her new room, permeated with the odor of stagnant damp and accumulated sadness, and gazes at the ceiling. The uncomfortable smell of the environment bothers him, but somehow it also conveys an inexplicable feeling of comfort. Memories begin to emerge in your mind. Once, his grandmother Kyoko had sent him a letter, a crumpled postcard, with a picture of the island of Torishirima. The lady's house was in disarray, as she spent her days traveling the world as a free soul. Someone needed to put order in that address, and, evidently, who was in charge of the mission? Precisely the only young man without classes, without a job, without a social life, that is, Harry, also known as the king of existential drama and excessive metaphors. While he is lost in these thoughts, tiredness overwhelms him, and he falls asleep right there, like a dropped stone. In his dream, he sees himself sinking into a pool, out of breath, unable to surface, feeling the pressure of the water dragging him down. At the moment when there seems to be no more salvation, he wakes up, sweaty, confused, and with a parched throat like his plans for the future. It's getting dark. The sky takes on shades of orange and purple. He grumbles intensely and decides to look for Misaki, hoping to get something worthy of being called dinner. With somewhat forced enthusiasm, she informs him that they only have some Maruhan instant soups. Outraged, he protests, stating that his stomach deserves respect. Misaki, out of patience, throws him the motorcycle keys and says that if he wants something better, he should go look for it himself. Without thinking much, Harry sets off on her little culinary adventure. You will find a modest and welcoming inn, with wooden tables and a delicious aroma in the air. He sits down, looks at the menu written on a blackboard and asks with good humor, "A happy menu, please." The chef looks at him with an enigmatic look, goes to the kitchen and returns with a steaming plate of chicken and egg broth. Confused, Harry says, "But I ordered a happy menu." Without losing his composure, the chef replies, "The chicken and the egg died together. It's a happy ending." And, in the face of such wisdom, there is no possible argument. He devours the dish and, to be honest, it was really delicious. With her belly full, she decides to walk a little around the island. The streets are empty, the air is fresh, and the dim lighting of the houses barely reveals the way. After wandering aimlessly, he arrives on the outskirts of an elementary school, certainly the most inappropriate place to be at that time of night. However, once again, life surprises him. You hear a noise. When you look through the bars, you see a swimming pool. Without permission, cross the gates and approach with caution. Inside the water, a girl is submerged, holding her breath. "Who are you?" he asks. "I'm Harry," he responds nervously, and returns the question. The girl says she is practicing swimming. She looks uncomfortable, and no wonder. Imagine yourself alone, in a bikini, at night, when a stranger comes up and starts talking as if it were something ordinary. Noticing the discomfort, he tries to remedy the situation, explaining that he got lost and is looking for the Kato house. The girl retorts, saying that perhaps he is referring to the Sakajara residence. He insists no, but she persists. As the argument goes nowhere, and noticing that the situation is becoming awkward, Harry decides to leave. Before leaving, the girl sighs and gives him instructions to return. He thanks her and asks why she is swimming at night. She warns that this is dangerous. What if a boy with dubious intentions showed up to watch her? She looks at him sternly. "Dosoi," she replies coldly. Back at the house, Misaki is irritated because Harry ate alone and didn't bring her anything. He smiles, embarrassed, and admits that the meal was delicious. Ask the meaning of the word dosoi. The answer comes from a soft voice. It's another girl, with purple hair, watching him from the doorway. She greets him with "good morning" and introduces herself as Omi, the other relative who lives in the house. Harry, still a little sleepy, returns the introduction, and she informs him that breakfast is served. He finds a plate of fried rice and eyes it suspiciously. However, something inside tells him that this summer will be anything but ordinary. Once the meal is over, it's time to share the household chores. As no one is there on vacation, they organize a blackboard with the days of the week and the responsibilities: taking out the trash, washing the dishes, taking care of the laundry, cleaning rooms and bathrooms. Each one makes a different facial expression when drawing a task. Omi tries to manipulate the results with grimaces, but ends up revealing his plans out loud. Harry, of course, hears everything. What's wrong with that family that can't keep their thoughts inside their heads? They repeat the draw, and Omi loses again. On the third try, with an impeccable poker face, she finally starts winning. After that, Nomi says goodbye and goes out to play in the street. Harry, in turn, questions Misaki about what he should do, but she simply replies, "Go for a walk." Sometime later, she offers to help him, but for now, she asks him to go explore the island and see if he finds anyone interesting. He winks at him in a complicit way. Harry, intrigued by the suggestion, follows his advice and, by pure coincidence, comes across a young girl discreetly blinking under the shade of a tree. The breeze coming from the coast gently caresses Agustin de Porras, who finds comfort in the shade of the small tree. Next to him rests a peculiar creature, a hybrid between a cat, a fox, and an alien-looking being, which strongly resembles a Pokemon. Harry, curious, tries to decipher what species it is, but is then surprised by an unexpected event. The young woman, who until then seemed to be just resting, staggers and collapses onto the soft, inviting grass. Harry, taken by his usual curiosity and signs of, to say the least, inconvenient behavior, sees this as an opportunity and pretends to help her, but ends up just holding back the drool that drips from the corner of his mouth. The girl suddenly awakens and finds a stranger watching her attentively. Even worse, she realizes that he is in direct contact with her breast. Outraged, she reacts firmly, and, in an ironic tone, says that, if he intends to abuse her vulnerable condition, she should at least do it with more dexterity, pushing him with significant force. After the episode, the tension between them decreases. Harry tries to alleviate the situation, explaining the context of the scene they are in, so that she understands where she is and what is happening. He also asks her not to be so hostile, because, according to his words, his heart is in a delicate state and he feels offended by such distrust. The young woman, in turn, responds coldly, declaring that, if one day she wakes up and sees him standing over her, she hopes that he will respect her and not dare to bother her. Harry, embarrassed, tries to apologize, but she interrupts him, stating that she just wants him to let her sleep in peace, without inappropriate jokes or advances. "I'm not asking for much," she concludes. At that moment, Harry realizes, with alarm, that it is already 2 o'clock in the afternoon and urgently exclaims that he is late for work. He leaves hurriedly, accompanied by his strange pet, the alien creature called Inari. Before leaving, Harry checks the time on his watch and is surprised to find that it is, in fact, exactly 2 o'clock. It is intriguing. How did the girl know, if she never looked at a watch? Then, he heads to a small pier, where he begins to express one of his famous reflections out loud poetic monologues that he cultivates with fervor. At that moment, a wave crashes against the rocks and splashes intensely over him, drenching him from head to toe. As a form of fan service for the female audience watching him, he removes his wet shirt and hangs it on a makeshift clothesline attached to his motorcycle. When he decides to return home, he comes across another man walking calmly along the road completely naked, just like him. Surprised, Harry approaches him and asks who he is. The man, confused or provocative, just says that he, Harry, shouldn't be dressed like that. He probably meant the opposite, that he shouldn't be naked. Suddenly, a shot passes close to Harry's face, leaving him in a state of alert. He realizes that someone fired from an observation tower, without any prior warning, just like a foreign police approach. A young woman, armed with a water pistol, appears and declares that it is forbidden to walk around naked outside the bathing area, demanding that they get dressed or face the consequences. Confused, Harry tries to understand the situation, while the other boy reveals that it is a kind of hunting game. The girl shoots again, and the stranger orders Harry to escape as quickly as possible. He obeys, leaving the stranger behind, being hit by jets of water as he rolls across the floor. Back at his grandmother's house, Harry is welcomed by his mother who, although short in stature, has a provocative personality. She watches him shirtless and seems to enjoy what she sees. He comments that the local custom of wearing skimpy clothing seems to have influenced him. Then he asks him to get dressed and informs him that a package has arrived. Inside the box is an envelope with photographs of the swim team. When he sees them, he asks if, by any chance, he belongs to the club. Harry says no, that he was actually part of the men's swimsuit club. Faced with the strangeness, she decides to investigate with her jacket whether such a club really exists, but when she returns, Harry has already left. He returns to the pool where Shirohe, the gray-haired girl, was training. She sees him and tries to push him away, saying she doesn't want any kind of intimacy. Harry, however, only offers advice on improving his technique and then walks away. A curious boy. Soon after, we observe Yumi, a lonely girl, eating rice in silence, when a man in a suit enters without saying a word. He crosses the room naturally and goes straight to the bedroom. Yumi watches him, but doesn't react. The scene is already familiar to her. The narrative returns to the present. Yumi is now sitting next to Eri, eating peacefully. A remarkable transformation. It seems that, finally, she is starting to open up. Or at least, she is no longer alone. Meanwhile, Harry has just been busy with meals, naps, and motorcycle rides around the island, searching for his ideal waifu. On one of these trips towards the bay, he meets a new young woman. They don't exchange words, they just look at each other briefly, suggesting that their formal introduction will be made at an opportune moment. He then meets Shiroha again, who remains still as if in a state of waiting. Caleri, who already realizes the discomfort that his mere presence causes to others, decides to move away. Before leaving, Shiroha thanks him for the advice he received at the pool the day before, recognizing its usefulness. Harry, surprised, notes that his random thoughts can sometimes be beneficial. After that, everyone goes their own way. Jer heads to a temple in the mountains, where he intends to pray to the Virgin of Guadalupe for a miracle. During his prayer, he is interrupted by a group of children who recognize him. Their grandmother had told them about the peculiar man who talks to himself out loud. Curious, they ask if he is about to deliver another one of his philosophical reflections. Jer, impatient, chases them away, wanting silence. Continuing his journey, he arrives at a lighthouse, where he hears melodic singing. When he looks up, he sees a young blonde singing as if she were in an alternative music video. He tries to talk, but she responds with incomprehensible words, Magu Kiri. He understands nothing, nor do we. Still, the girl responds with sarcasm, saying that she is searching for herself and a purpose in this world. Jer, true to his eccentric style, comments that if he intends to throw himself from there, at least perform a stylish maneuver during the fall. The girl responds that she doesn't want to die, that she is invisible. He responds by saying that she is not invincible, but rather a sick person trying to get attention. He suggests that he come down, or he will end up believing in his own illusion. He goes to a kind of deactivated room, where he is surprised by a familiar figure, the Hunter of Naked Men, already famous by her nickname. She points a comical-looking rifle at him and warns him not to say her name. In a dramatic tone, she reveals that the weapon also has a name, Hydra Gladiator 2. Although it looks like just a water pistol, it imposes itself with all the seriousness in the world. From that moment on, we will call her Teyuakinator. The boy from the other day is also present, and now we know his name is Riddy. They welcome Harry naturally and inform her that there will be a welcome party that night. Lights, music, maybe even cake. Harry tries to explain that he is just there to help at his grandmother's house, even though, until then, he has done absolutely nothing useful. It doesn't matter. Island tradition says that if someone stays for more than 3 days, they must hold a celebration. There is no escape. Finally, they mention that there is only one person left to complete the group, a certain Tenzin, who is on the mountain. They ask Harry to go get him. As he has no more important commitments, he accepts. Arriving at a hidden warehouse, he finds a man hanging from the ceiling, performing sit-ups with the skill of a ninja about to face his graduation exam. Completely unexpectedly, the two begin to play an impromptu game of table tennis on an old metal table, covered in rust, long forgotten in that location. Harry, with effort, manages to score a point, which causes an immediate change in Tenzin's posture. From then on, he sees him as a worthy opponent, which leads him to take the game seriously. Taking inspiration from Rock Lee, he removes the weights he was wearing on his wrists, determined to demonstrate his full potential and break the limits. But just when the situation was starting to get really interesting, Mick abruptly arrives to interrupt them, warning that everyone is already waiting for his presence. After the warning, Tenzin questions Mickey about who the guy he was playing with earlier was. Then, the group heads to the same restaurant where Ario had been on his first day on the island, which, by the way, is no surprise considering that it is apparently the only restaurant available in the entire archipelago. There, they welcome him warmly, although they exaggerate a little when they refer to the meeting as a party. In practice, there are just 5 people, the usual 3, an extra friend, and a new member called Oh who, yes, is the same young woman who woke up under the tree previously. The others soon realize that Harry and all already knew each other and begin to ask, insistently, how long ago and how this happened, behaving in an exaggerated and somewhat theatrical manner. Both subtly dodge the question, and Harry, wanting to change the subject, decides to ask who exactly they are and what they are doing there. In response, they explain that they are responsible for the group of young people on the island, which, in theory, seems positive. But in practice, it borders on the absurd, given that there are almost no young people living there. They themselves, the 5 present, already constitute practically the entire club. As they talk about this, and for no apparent reason, Tensen picks up a chicken leg from his plate and starts swinging it backwards, as if analyzing its aerodynamics. Maybe he was trying out some new self-defense method, or, more likely, he was just bored with the direction of the conversation. For a moment, it even looks like he's holding his thigh as if it were a table tennis racket. At that moment, Jer, always curious, asks about Shiro and why she wasn't invited. Apparently, the others didn't know that Harry had any kind of connection with her, and they appear surprised. They then explain that she is not a very sociable person, has difficulty dealing with coexistence, and prefers to remain alone. She is a bit snobbish and usually says, without any filter, that no one tries to play cheap games with her. However, it was already too late. Just by mentioning his name, everything seemed to change. The next day, Harry wakes up early, leaves the house in good spirits and states that he needs to do gymnastics on the radio. Something that no one understands exactly what it is, but he seems to attach a lot of importance to the activity. Before leaving, he tells Jer that he left breakfast prepared for him, and asks him to at least wash the dishes before leaving after all. If he's not going to contribute anything else, he should at least do that. Gary, as usual, decides to explore the island on his own. With the heat, he decides to stop at a small market to cool off. The owner, a man with an extremely positive aura, invites you in, as it is clear that he is sweating a lot. Gary accepts the invitation and sits outside to eat something, but the lady in the place reprimands him, saying that it is ridiculous to be outside and insists that he come in, as there is a very powerful fan inside, which will make him look like a new man. Gary enters the place as if he were in his own home and, as he moves around freely, ends up entering the back, where he surprises a young woman who is bathing. It's Ole. Scared and angry, she demands an immediate explanation. He nervously tries to justify it by saying it wasn't intentional, but the excuse sounds incredibly implausible. He states that he studies at an all-boys school, where he is used to seeing only screws, and, when he saw a nut, he ended up getting confused, a very unfortunate mechanical metaphor. To try to remedy the situation, he throws an object that was at hand, a glass of slushy, as if that would relieve the tension. The gesture, evidently, only makes everything worse. He, embarrassed, apologizes once again and offers her the chance to get revenge. If she wishes, she can throw a scratch card his way too. A kind of poetic justice. Ao, who doesn't forgive easily, accepts the proposal and, without hesitation, pours an entire plate of iced tea over his head. Harry is momentarily stunned, as if he wasn't expecting the reaction, but because he doesn't know how to accept defeat silently, he counterattacks with an improvised ball of shaved ice. Technically, it wasn't snow, but the effect was similar. Jer joins the game and, in less than a minute, the three are already involved in a frenetic war of crushed ice and sugar, as if they were runaway children, completely oblivious to the existence of rules or supervision. Meanwhile, the poor owner of the establishment only hears the screams and laughter coming from her store being transformed into a war zone. With each wasted scratch card, she loses a sale, but young people don't seem to consider this at any time. After the mess, Harry is completely soaked and takes off his shirt to squeeze it and try to dry it. When arriving home, it's then that Harry notices Yumi getting ready to leave. She announces that she will hunt for insects and suggests that he at least venture around the island or look for some activity. Who knows, maybe even an adventure. Or, if you prefer, something more suitable like a decent job. Jerry, looking tired, claims he is too old for adventures. Yumi, however, doesn't give up. With a mischievous gleam in her eyes, she challenges him to seek out an adult adventure. This makes Harry's imagination wander into less than sacred territories until he stops himself and clarifies that he was actually referring to something simple, like going fishing in a nearby lake. Finally, Jerry decides to follow the advice and heads to the lake, where he again finds Shiroha, who remains motionless at the water's edge, in absolute silence. There is something ghostly about her presence, as if the spirit of a young girl drowned there was about to emerge. When Harry approaches to understand what she is doing, Shiroha suddenly points her finger at him and declares, with comical seriousness, that she will activate the radar. Without really understanding, Harry joins the game, pretending that he was hit by his invisible shot. Shiroha laughs heartily at the performance. To justify the gesture, he improvises an absurd explanation. It is an old local tradition, a kind of spiritual greeting passed down between generations, typical of the island. He asks her not to feel uncomfortable. It's nothing embarrassing, just a peculiar custom. The two then continue pointing their radars at the lake until they are exhausted. A strange, but oddly enough, pleasant moment. Harry, interested, asks if she likes manga. She watches him for a moment, as if considering whether she should respond, and then says yes, she really likes it even though he clearly doesn't like it. And, without further ado, he leaves without looking back, leaving Harry with a confused expression, trying to understand what he had said wrong. On the way back, he comes across a young woman with a gothic appearance in the middle of a curious scene. She is desperately trying to free a suitcase that has gotten stuck in the sink. The situation seems straight out of a comedy manga. Harry approaches cautiously and offers help. After a few tries, he manages to free the suitcase. She thanks him in a surprisingly refined tone. Even more surprising, she already knows his name. Apparently, that guy had already become a well-known figure on the island. She introduces herself as Kamom, with a confident voice that conveys the impression of living in her own private universe. Harry, without thinking too much, comments that his name resembles that of seagulls. Kamom, smiling, says that now he owes her a favor in exchange for the help he provided, carrying his suitcase. Harry accepts, although without enthusiasm. However, I didn't expect her to climb onto the suitcase like a sled. Perplexed, he asks why he is doing that. She responds, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, that it is to avoid getting tired from walking. Unquestionable logic, he thinks. Curious, Harry asks what she has in her suitcase. Kamom approaches slowly, as if she were going to reveal a deep secret, and whispers something enigmatic in her ear, with a smile of someone who knows more than she reveals. As they continue walking, Kamom begins to hum a song. Harry recognizes the melody and asks what it is. She playfully responds, "The Average Witch Charlotte, a popular song from years ago." Justifies that, as nowadays the song has fallen into oblivion. Copyrights are cheap, and they can use it in the anime. Obviously, they're not going to add anything from the Taylor suite. They would lose their entire budget on that. They then meet Konomi, who observes the unusual scene. With a confused expression, he asks Harry what he is doing. Embarrassed, he responds that he is pushing a suitcase with a seductive young goth girl on top, and that this is the adult adventure they suggested. Konomi raises one of her eyebrows, as if seriously considering whether she should throw him down a manhole, but she just sighs with resignation. At that moment, another child comes running and announces that a woman wearing a kimono is lying ahead, apparently hungry. Before embarking on this new mission, someone warns that the path ahead is a very steep descent and that you need to be careful with the improvised cart. When they reach the slope, they realize that it really looks like an old abandoned ski slope. Demonstrating, perhaps for the first time in his life, a trace of common sense, Jerry suggests to Kamom that she get off her suitcase and walk. But she, with a provocative smile, replies that anyone who is afraid of being born should not have been born. Before he can stop her, she runs away screaming, shouting loudly, "I'm Kamom, welcome to my Big Jaka's debut." holding the suitcase tight as if it were a skateboard. She goes down the hill at high speed. Harry runs after, with the feeling that this will end badly. Kamom, laughing as if she were in an amusement park, slides without a break until, as expected, she flies directly into the sea, suitcase and all. Jerry runs desperately to the edge of the pier, hoping to see her emerge from the water, but he doesn't see anything. It is at this moment that the scene takes on a cinematic tone. He has an immediate flashback. His mind transports him back to that tragic day. At the moment when her existence finally seemed worthwhile, she was participating in a swimming competition. The rhythmic sound of water splash, splash, splash reverberated like an emotionally charged soundtrack. The audience burst into enthusiastic applause. She dived with the grace and agility of a dolphin, as if she were the owner of the waters. But she forgot one elementary detail: she didn't breathe before diving. As a result, he began to struggle, swallowing water, suffocating like an unprotected creature in front of all the spectators. Back in the present time, he, without thinking twice, threw himself into the pool with the intention of saving her, but, surprisingly, he repeated the same mistake. He also forgot to fill his lungs with air before diving. Fortunately, the girl's mother was an experienced swimmer and was able to rescue them both. As they floated in the water, she sincerely thanked him for taking a risk on her rescue, even though she didn't know exactly what she was doing. At that moment, Harry noticed a sticker glued to her bag, the image of a kitten with an eye patch, like a pirate. Kamom explained that it was the symbol of the enigmatic Jijnek, something that seemed vaguely familiar to her. After leaving the sea, they both lay down under the sun to dry off. Harry inevitably cast a furtive glance in her direction, watching her as she wrung out her wet clothes. Kamom, attentive, noticed the gesture out of the corner of her eyes and questioned him, asking what he was looking at. Trying to sound introspective and poetic, he replied that he was just watching the blue sky reflected in his body. She then shared that she had been to that island many years before, as a child, during a summer camp. Even though it was only one season, the experience left him with lasting memories. That's why he decided to return, looking to relive those cherished memories. When Harry asked what she intended to do now, she grabbed his hand, without hesitation, and dragged him with her. Confused, he asked where they were going, but she, without looking back, just said that she would see soon. After a few minutes of walking, they arrived at the small grocery store in the village. There, they saw Shiroja Chabalita next to a vending machine. Harry approached her carefully, trying not to scare her again, and apologized for the previous episode at the lake. He took advantage and asked if she intended to buy something. Shiroja, as usual, kept to herself and didn't seem willing to venture into the store alone. Harry, trying to be kind, offered to do the shopping for her. She then handed him a small coin and asked him to bring a watermelon popsicle. However, Harry, stubborn and proud, entered the establishment and came out seconds later with a melon popsicle after all. No one was giving him orders, he thought. Upon noticing the exchange, Shiroja declared that he didn't want that nonsense and rejected the gift. Wasting no time, Harry handed the popsicle to the other WFU, who was silently waiting in the suitcase. The group continued their journey and finally arrived at the Old Cayman Elementary School. Kamom, with agility, climbed the fence and climbed to the roof, asking Harry to follow her. He hesitated, confused by the design of the abandoned backpacks. Why would they leave bags like that? Someone could just steal the wallets. She then pointed to an old building and said that was where the real adventure would begin. They walked across the roofs until they reached a window in the warehouse, which, curiously, did not have a lock. Kamom opened it naturally and entered with dexterity. Inside, they found an old trunk that had the same drawing of the pirate cat from that summer on it. Kamom showed Harry an old notebook and revealed that, as a child, they had hidden all their secrets inside that trunk, planning to open it only a decade later. The chest, however, had 4 locks. Harry offered to smash them, but she warned him not to act like a barbarian. Curious, he asked what secret she was hiding. As expected, Kamom stopped talking and told him not to insist. Taking him to the window, he suggested that he observe the landscape. He obeyed, and the panorama was truly enchanting. However, the scene took a long time to play, as if the scene was being seen in real time, without cuts. As the sun set, Kamom thanked him for the company and asked if he had fun. Harry admitted that, in the end, the experience wasn't so bad. Although he found the outcome anticlimactic after all, they were curious to know what was inside the trunk. Kamom assured that the next adventure would be more exciting. They said goodbye, and Harry was left alone, immersed in his final reflection. He thought about the brave fools who like to throw themselves into uncertain situations. For him, what they experienced that day seemed too modest to be considered an adventure. After all, adventures usually involve dragons, swords, epic combats, and mysterious ladies in exotic clothes. However, there, in the attic of a school and on the walls of an abandoned swimming pool, they had discovered something with profound emotional value, and, therefore, it could indeed be called an adventure. It was then that he realized that Kamom was still there, standing in front of him. He asked why she hadn't left. She replied, with a slight smile, that she was listening to his silly reflections, and she confessed to being tired, not wanting to carry her suitcase home alone. Harry suggested he throw it away, but she informed him that the suitcase was with him, and therefore it was up to him to take it. Harry, overcome by the sweetness of that charming girl, was unable to refuse. He accompanied her to the port and asked if she would leave by boat. She replied that it was something similar and asked where he lived. He explained that he lived on the other side of the island. Kamom then felt guilty for having made him stray so far from his path. But Harry assured her that there was no problem. It was better to accompany her than face the house's guard dog.